corporate background. Started hustling, side business hustle in property about 15 years ago. Just building the portfolio up slowly alongside work and kids and all that sort of stuff. So that was going very well. Got made redundant about 12 years ago. Worked at AstraZeneca, which is fairly local to Nottingham, down in Loughborough. Yeah, took the redundancy, against my better judgment, wishes actually, I should say. Became a full-time property investor because I quite like my job. So I was always happy to do a bit of both, but it wasn't to be. AstraZeneca closed their site 2011. So I kind of left at that point and became a full-time property investor. Since then, the portfolio has continued to grow. I was looking for what to do, because suddenly you go from corporate to, well, no day job, basically. So I thought, here's a chance to actually jump totally into property. But coming from that background, I needed something to fill my week, rather than just, as I always say, watching the rents come in. Okay. And so the first job I actually got was working for the NRLA. So I worked for them for nearly 3 years. Okay. So I got pretty good at regs, meeting with councils. I was their eyes and ears, basically. I was their local rep for the East Midlands area. So I ran a lot of their local meetings, all with landlords rather than, they're all investors, but rather than investor meetings, more landlord meetings to talk about regulations. Portfolio carried on. Eventually I gave up the NRLA stuff because actually, as part of my corporate job, I've always liked mentoring people one-to-one, okay? Because I had a team, and obviously that was kind of part of the course to mentor the team. So when I got a chance to do some mentoring for an education company about 10 years ago, I started to do that, decided to give up the NRLA. Portfolio kept growing in the background. And then the other thing I did quite a lot at AstraZeneca was being a science company. I actually wrote quite a lot of scientific papers. So that's the bit that was missing in my life. And then lo and behold, YPN came knocking, or I approached them actually, because I'm a bit like that. Get your foot in the door. Just started doing their book reviews actually for them monthly. And they said, God, you can write, can't you? And I said, yeah, just a bit of transferable skills there. And then slowly I just joined the editorial team. And then because of a reorganization within the team during COVID, they said, look, you're very well networked. You're quite well respected, and we'd quite like you to just take on the role. It's all temporary part-time work. Don't want anybody thinking I work 60 hours a week. I don't. So apart from being a full-time property investor, property mentor, I'm also now co-editor of YPM magazine, but it's all part-time, just so that I've got, currency, time is the currency that we've got, no more coming our way. So you kind of got to, and that's pretty much what I do day to day. On the property front, it started off with buy-to-lets, and I still do those, and slowly migrated over to HMOs, which is going to be the focus of the talk in January. I do give several different talks, but I'm happy to do the YPN talk. I will put it into context for everybody because, I always feel that people who come to networking events, they're not all at the same starting point.
Correct.
So it's really, really good to just take one step back and say, here's where it fits in. Now let's focus on the subject that we're going to talk about tonight, because people jump straight in. Well, somebody might be just starting out. Okay. And it's no point saying I'm not taking any prisoners. Let's just set the scene. Okay. And then of course, that's what I'll be covering for majority of the talk. So HMOs is kind of key part of our business, and that's kind of a bit of background and on the property front and other things I do in property. Yeah, so with HMOs, I think people kind of get, I won't say confused, but they don't get the full picture. And because I sit in the middle of a lot of information, because I mentor and I'm co-editor of YPN, my talks generally tend to be more holistic, okay, rather than people thinking, oh, HMOs, that's professional HMOs. Oh, HMOs, that's 5 or 6 people sharing. Well, actually, because I'm a bit of a geek with regulations, I'll clarify exactly what's what in terms of regulations of HMOs. What is an HMO? It sounds basic, but until you start people at the baseline, I don't think you can take them to the next level. And you usually lose them, and that should not be the aim of any speaker, to lose the audience. Okay, you want to bring the audience along with you as you're kind of educating them. So I will definitely be doing some of that. There's more than one model for doing HMOs, and it depends on your area. you know, which model you want to go into, different specs people can do for HMOs. I see refurb costs of 150,000 to set up HMOs at the really top high end. And people might then think, well, oh my God, you know, it's, well, actually, that's not true. That's just one model that certain people adopt. So in Nottingham, for example, my focus is very much on student HMOs, okay? And they're quite okay with sharing, you know, bathroom facilities, okay? Because kind of students are used to that. So that's my sweet spot, okay? I don't have any en suites, okay? So does that mean I get significantly less rent? Probably get less rent. Significantly, I'm not convinced. They're in great locations. That's the point. And, you know, and the student model is very different to professional lets. So I'll bring that out. Obviously show some pretty pictures, and people will tell from there that actually mine are not what I would call, I suppose you call them high end, don't you? I don't know what that word. It's a new trend word. I don't agree with that co-living thing, but mine are middle of the road, I would say. You know, you could say low end, middle of the road, and high end. I think I stick in the middle. I'm fully accredited locally. Okay, so what that means is the council can visit my HMOs at any time. They're all licensed as well, which exactly means the same thing. So I'm just that kind of landlord that, you know, provides a good product at a fair price. And so I'll be talking about, you know, that particular model. Regs obviously come into it. People get licensing and Article 4 confused all the time, okay? And they're totally different. And so I've given talks actually on, and written an article on Article 4 versus licensing, just to try and explain to people. So I'll be bringing some of that out in my talk to say, step 1, do this. Step 2, do this, okay, in whichever area. Because I think, again, it's that baseline, isn't it? You've got to make sure that people understand the basics before you take them to the next level. So there's a lot of emphasis on that. Tips along the way, of course, things that, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as I always say. It's not always good. You know, you do get problems. And I think you're only an honest person if you share the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, there's not been much ugly, but you know, the good and the bad kind of happens in any strategy that you use. That's just kind of, that's normal part of this business, I'm afraid, and people just have to accept it, suck it up, and kind of move on. So I'll be covering a chunk of all that kind of stuff to do with HMOs. Hopefully, it'd be really, really informative. As I say, it's not to lose the audience, not to bamboozle them with massive spreadsheets. They must go away from the talk understanding more than they did when they walked in. I think the key thing is, and that's the feedback I love the best, okay, not wow, you're an amazing HMO investor. No, I'd rather people say, wow, that was so clear. Nobody's ever explained it that clearly before. And that is the key feedback metric I look for. And because I think if you're a speaker, if the audience don't leave away knowing more than they knew when they came in, I think as a speaker you failed. Okay, and so that not just means the content, but people can see your slides. And I don't know your room, I've not been there, but to me there's nothing worse than somebody putting up a slide and saying, well, you won't see that unless you sit in the front. My usual answer is, well, you shouldn't have put the slide up in the first place, because the room is bigger than the front row. Okay, so it's that presentation, which I got a lot of that training at AstraZeneca, I have to be honest, because obviously when you're in corporate, you're presenting to the board, the directors, and they don't tolerate any of that kind of, you know, font size violation, as we used to call it, where you can't see because there's so much text that and the no images, the audience falls asleep. So I'm anything but that, you know. So it's more conversational, and I think you can only do that if you know your subject. And you know you've got good slides. So that is my key reason why people should come. You will definitely leave at the end of the day saying, I hope, okay, you've understood HMOs a lot more than you ever did. I'll be touching on the other strategies, okay, and you know, some controversial things. I always say that actually if you're looking for recurring rental income, there are actually only 3 approaches. It'll come out on the slides and people can argue against me, but plenty of sub models within those 3 approaches. So for example, HMOs is where we're mainly going to be focusing on. Clearly you could do student houses, they're HMOs. You could do professionals, well, they're HMOs. I know some landlords, because of their location and their market, the demographic of the tenants, actually rent out 4, 5, 6 bed HMOs to housing benefit tenants, okay? And they're HMOs, they're all HMOs. It's just the tenant type's different. Okay, and people don't always appreciate that. So people will get a lot of that kind of information, I would say, in a more holistic form, so that, yeah, they'll leave knowing a lot about HMOs, but they'll leave with the knowledge that, you know, in context, where does that fit with that? Because people have to finally make a decision of, do I get into HMOs or not? Where shall I do them? Which model? What specification? You know, and some of that might be down to how much funds you've got, how confident you are, what your market looks like. You know, all these things that we're creating as investors, they're all products, right? Okay.
Exactly.
And yeah, exactly. And if your product has got no demand and you can't sell it, well, actually, you've got a lovely HMO, but it's not really a product. It's just a lovely HMO. So I think you have to do a lot of that due diligence to fit the HMO to the marketplace, because otherwise, I mean, you could overspend, couldn't you, by creating all en suite, and actually it's just factory workers around there who A, can't afford it, okay, and secondly, don't need it. Okay, so there's that kind of, you know, level-headed thinking, I think. So people will get a lot of that, you know, broadly. Hopefully they'll get a lot of that on the night. Okay, and so it'd be more, I'm hoping it'd be more Q&A rather than, you know, 45 minutes, you know, 100 miles an hour non-stop. So I will take my time and explain, you know, explain these slides as I go through them.